Section 24 of Villette by Charlotte Bronte. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Leanne Fortune. Section 24. Following Madame Beck's fate, with its 3 preceding weeks of relaxation, its brief 12 hours burst of hilarity and dissipation, and its 1 subsequent day of utter languor, came a period of reaction, 2 months of real application, of close, hard study. These 2 months, being the last of the année scolaire, were indeed the only genuine working months in the year. To them was procrastinated, into them concentrated, alike by professors, mistresses, and pupils, the main burden of preparation for the examinations preceding the distribution of prizes. Candidates for awards had then to work in good earnest. Masters and teachers had to set their shoulders to the wheel, to urge on the backward and diligently aid and train the more promising. A showy demonstration, a telling exhibition, must be got up for public view, and all means were fair to this end. I scarcely noted how the other teachers went to work. I had my own business to mind, and my task was not the least onerous, being to imbue some 90 sets of brains with a due tincture of what they considered a most complicated and difficult science, that of the English language, and to drill 90 tongues in what for them was an almost impossible pronunciation, the lisping and hissing dentals of the Isles. The examination day arrived. Awful day! Prepared for with anxious care, dressed for with silent dispatch, nothing vaporous or fluttering now, no white gauze or azure streamers. The grave, close, compact was the order of the toilette. It seemed to me that I was this day especially doomed, the main burden and trial falling on me alone of all the female teachers. The others were not expected to examine in the studies they taught, the professor of literature, Monsieur Paul, taking upon himself this duty. He, this school autocrat, gathered all and sundry reins into the hollow of his one hand. He irefully rejected any colleague. He would not have help. Madame herself, who evidently rather wished to undertake the examination in geography, her favorite study, which she taught well, was forced to succumb and be subordinate to her despotic kinsman's direction. The whole staff of instructors, male and female, he set aside, and stood on the examiner's estrade alone. It irked him that he was forced to make one exception to this rule. He could not manage English. He was obliged to leave that branch of education in the English teacher's hands, which he did, not without a flush of naïve jealousy. A constant crusade against the amour-propre of every human being but himself was the crochet of this able but fiery and grasping little man. He had a strong relish for public representation in his own person, but an extreme abhorrence of the like display in any other. He quelled, he kept down when he could, and when he could not, he fumed like a bottled storm. On the evening preceding the examination day, I was walking in the garden, as were the other teachers, and all the boarders. Monsieur Emmanuel joined me in the Allée d'Enfants. His cigar was at his lips, his paletot, a most characteristic garment of no particular shape, hung dark and menacing, the tassel of his bonnet grec sternly shadowed his left temple, his black whiskers curled like those of a wrathful cat, his blue eye had a cloud in its glitter. "And see," he began, abruptly fronting and arresting me, "vous allez trôner comme une reine, demain trôner à mes côtes, sans doute vous sévrez devant les délices de l'autorité, je crois voir, et je ne sais quoi de rayonnante petit ambitieux. Now, the fact was, he happened to be entirely mistaken. I did not, could not, estimate the admiration or the good opinion of tomorrow's audience at the same rate he did. Had that audience numbered as many personal friends and acquaintance for me as for him, I know not how it might have been. I speak of the case as it stood. On me, school triumphs shed but a cold lustre. I had wondered, and I wondered now, how it was that for him they seemed to shine as with hearth warmth and hearth glow. He cared for them perhaps too much, I probably too little. However, I had my own fancies as well as he. I liked, for instance, to see Monsieur Emmanuel jealous. It lit up his nature and woke his spirit. It threw all sorts of queer lights and shadows over his dun face and into his violet azure eyes. He used to say that his black hair and blue eyes were une de ses beautés. There was a relish in his anger. It was artless, earnest, quite unreasonable, but never hypocritical. I uttered no disclaimer then of the complacency he attributed to me. I merely asked where the English examination came in, whether at the commencement or close of the day. I hesitate, said he, whether at the very beginning, before many persons are come, and when your aspiring nature will not be gratified by a large audience, or quite at the close, when everybody is tired, and only a jaded and worn-out attention will be at your service. Que voulez-vous, monsieur? I said, affecting dejection. One ought to be deux with you. You are one of those beings who must be kept down. I know you, I know you. Other people in this house see you pass, and think that a colourless shadow has gone by. As for me, I scrutinized your face once, and it sufficed. You are satisfied that you understand me? Without answering directly, he went on, were you not gratified when you succeeded in that vaudeville? I watched you, and saw a passionate ardour for triumph in your physiognomy. What fire shot into the glance! Not mere light, but flame. Je me tiens pour averti. What feeling I had on that occasion, monsieur, and pardon me if I say, you immensely exaggerate both its quality and quantity, was quite abstract. I did not care for the vaudeville. I hated the part you assigned me. I had not the slightest sympathy with the audience below the stage. They are good people, doubtless, but do I know them? Are they anything to me? Can I care for being brought before their view again tomorrow? Will the examination be anything but a task to me? A task I wish well over? Shall I take it out of your hands? With all my heart, if you do not fear failure. But I should fail. I only know 3 phrases of English, and a few words. Par exemple, de son, de mon, de ster. Est-ce bien dit? My opinion is that it would be better to give up the thing altogether, to have no English examination, eh? If Madame consents, I consent. Heartily? Very heartily. He smoked his cigar in silence. He turned suddenly. Donnez-moi la main, said he, and the spite and jealousy melted out of his face, and a generous kindliness shone there instead. Come, we will not be rivals, we will be friends, he pursued. The examination shall take place, and I will choose a good moment, and instead of vexing and hindering, as I felt half inclined 10 minutes ago, for I have my malevolent moods, I always had from childhood, I will aid you sincerely. After all, you are solitary and a stranger, and have your way to make and your bread to earn. It may be well that you should become known. We will be friends. Do you agree? Out of my heart, monsieur, I am glad of a friend. I like that better than a triumph. Pauvrette, said he, and turned away and left the alley. The examination passed over well. Monsieur Paul was as good as his word, and did his best to make my part easy. The next day came the distribution of prizes. That also passed. The school broke up, the pupils went home, and now began the long vacation. That vacation! Shall I ever forget it? I think not. Madame Beck went, the first day of the holidays, to join her children at the seaside. All the 3 teachers had parents or friends with whom they took refuge. Every professor quitted the city. Some went to Paris, some to Beaumarine. Monsieur Paul set forth on a pilgrimage to Rome. The house was left quite empty, but for me, a servant, and a poor deformed and imbecile pupil, a sort of cretin, whom her stepmother in a distant province would not allow to return home. My heart almost died within me. Miserable longings strained its chords. How long were the September days! How silent, how lifeless, how vast and void seemed the desolate premises! How gloomy the forsaken garden, grey now with the dust of a town summer departed! Looking forward at the commencement of those 8 weeks, I hardly knew how I was to live to the end. My spirits had long been gradually sinking. Now that the prop of employment was withdrawn, they went down fast. Even to look forward was not to hope. The dumb future spoke no comfort, offered no promise, gave no inducement to bear present evil in reliance on future good. A sorrowful indifference to existence often pressed on me, a despairing resignation to reach betimes the end of all things earthly. Alas! when I had full leisure to look on life as life must be looked on by such as me, I found it but a hopeless desert, tawny sands, with no green fields, no palm tree, no well in view. The hopes which are dear to youth, which bear it up and lead it on, I knew not, and dared not know. If they knocked at my heart sometimes, an inhospitable bar to admission must be inwardly drawn. When they turned away thus rejected, tears sad enough sometimes flowed, but it could not be helped. I dared not give such guests lodging. So mortally did I fear the sin and weakness of presumption. Religious reader, you will preach to me a long sermon about what I have just written, and so will you, moralist, and you, stern sage. You, stoic, will frown, you, cynic, sneer, you, epicure, laugh. Well, each and all, take it your own way. I accept the sermon, frown, sneer, and laugh. Perhaps you are all right, and perhaps, circumstanced like me, you would have been, like me, wrong. The first month was, indeed, a long, black, heavy month to me. The cretin did not seem unhappy. I did my best to feed her well and keep her warm, and she only asked food and sunshine, or when that lacked, fire. Her weak faculties approved of inertion. Her brain, her eyes, her ears, her heart slept content. They could not wake to work, so lethargy was their paradise. 3 weeks of that vacation were hot, fair, and dry, but the 4th and 5th were tempestuous and wet. I do not know why that change in the atmosphere made a cruel impression on me, why the raging storm and beating rain crushed me with a deadlier paralysis than I had experienced while the air had remained serene. But so it was, and my nervous system could hardly support what it had, for many days and nights, to undergo in that huge empty house. How I used to pray to heaven for consolation and support! With what dread force the conviction would grasp me that fate was my permanent foe, never to be conciliated. I did not, in my heart arraign the mercy or justice of God for this. I concluded it to be a part of his great plan that some must deeply suffer while they live, and I thrilled in the certainty that of this number I was one. It was some relief when an aunt of the Cretan, a kind old woman, came one day and took away my strange deformed companion. The hapless creature had been at times a heavy charge. I could not take her out beyond the garden, and I could not leave her a minute alone, for her poor mind, like her body, was warped. Its propensity was to evil, a vague bent to mischief, an aimless malevolence, made constant vigilance indispensable. As she very rarely spoke, and would sit for hours together moping and mowing, and distorting her features with indescribable grimaces, it was more like being prisoned with some strange tameless animal than associating with a human being. Then there were personal attentions to be rendered which required the nerve of a hospital nurse. My resolution was so tried, it sometimes fell dead sick. These duties should not have fallen on me. A servant, now absent, had rendered them hitherto, and in the hurry of holiday departure, no substitute to fill this office had been provided. This tax and trial were by no means the least I have known in life. Still, menial and distasteful as they were, my mental pain was far more wasting and wearing. Attendance on the Cretan deprived me often of the power and inclination to swallow a meal, and sent me faint to the fresh air and the well or fountain in the court. But this duty never wrung my heart, or brimmed my eyes, or scalded my cheek with tears, hot as molten metal. The Cretan being gone, I was free to walk out. At first I lacked courage to venture very far from the Rue Fossette, but by degrees I sought the city gates, and passed them, and then went wandering away, far along chaussées, through fields, beyond cemeteries, Catholic and Protestant, beyond farmsteads, to lanes and little woods, and I know not where. A goad thrust me on, a fever forbade me to rest. A want of companionship maintained in my soul the cravings of a most deadly famine. I often walked all day, through the burning noon and the arid afternoon and the dusk evening, and came back with moonrise. While wandering in solitude, I would sometimes picture the present probable position of others, my acquaintance. There was Madame Beck at a cheerful watering place with her children, her mother, and a whole troop of friends who had sought the same scene of relaxation. Zélie St. Pierre was at Paris with her relatives. The other teachers were at their homes. There was Ginevra Fanshawe, whom certain of her connections had carried on a pleasant tour southward. Ginevra seemed to me the happiest. She was on the route of beautiful scenery. These September suns shone for her on fertile plains, where harvest and vintage matured under their mellow beam. These gold and crystal moons rose on her vision over blue horizons waved in mounted limes. But all this was nothing. I too felt those autumn suns, and saw those harvest moons, and I almost wished to be covered in with earth and turf, deep out of their influence, for I could not live in their light, nor make them comrades, nor yield them affection. But Ginevra had a kind of spirit with her, empowered to give constant strength and comfort, to gladden daylight and embalm darkness, the best of the good genii that God humanity curtained her with his wings, and canopied her head with his bending form. By true love was Ginevra followed. Never could she be alone. Was she insensible to this presence? It seemed to me impossible. I could not realize such deadness. I imagined her grateful in secret, loving now with reserve, but purposing one day to show how much she loved. I pictured her faithful hero half conscious of her coy fondness, and comforted by that consciousness, I conceived an electric cord of sympathy between them, a fine chain of mutual understanding, sustaining union through a separation of 100 leagues, carrying across mountain hollow communication by prayer and wish. Ginevra gradually became with me a sort of heroine. One day, perceiving this growing illusion, I said, "I really believe my nerves are getting overstretched. My mind has suffered somewhat too much. A malady is growing upon it. What shall I do? How shall I keep well?" End of section 24. Recording by Leanne Fortune.